This is Rainy Night Horrors. Outside, the storm brews, and with it comes something darker. Every drop masks a sound, every shadow holds a shape. You're not imagining it. You're hearing the truth. Listen closely. It's already here. It began with the air, tainted by an alien tang, acrid, biting, utterly wrong for the pastoral tranquility my Aunt Elara called home. By the time its meaning crystallized, the quietude had already swallowed me whole. A fortnight tending Aunt Elara's farmhouse while she chased sunshine south, a siren song to someone like me, Silas, suffocating in the city's concrete embrace and the tyranny of deadlines. I dreamt of porch swings swaying to the rhythm of cicadas, hands buried in cool earth, a blessed stillness. Reality offered a different spectacle, a descent into shadow. Next door stood the hollow shell Aunt Elara called the old Briarwood place, long surrendered to ivy and neglect, a skeletal finger pointing at the sky. So, the flicker of light behind its grimy panes on my second evening stirred only mild conjecture. New owners, perhaps, braving the decay. Simmering tomatoes scented the kitchen air, a comforting aroma soon challenged by that intrusive chemical sharpness. Faint, then insistent, it crept through the floorboards, a miasma that tightened my throat and stung my eyes by nightfall, a dissonant note in the country symphony. A ragged cough tore me from sleep near midnight. The chemical stench had saturated the house, thick and suffocating. Drawn by a disquiet I couldn't name, I lurched to the window, peering into the gloom. Silhouettes flitted across the neighboring lawn, burdened with canisters and crates under the indifferent moon. Not renovators working late. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Something clandestine unfolded in the darkness. My fingers hovered over the emergency call button, a lifeline, but doubt stayed my hand. An overblown fear, a mundane explanation eluding my sleep-addled brain, disrupting Elara's haven with flashing lights and sirens, felt like a betrayal. So I watched, a silent sentinel perched behind lace curtains. Daylight brought no relief, only a gnawing anxiety beneath the persistent, fainter reek. Vehicles, sleek, anonymous, windows darkly opaque, bearing unfamiliar state insignias, punctuated the day's quiet rhythm, arriving and departing with unsettling regularity. From my porch-side vigil, feigning literary absorption, a chilling choreography emerged. Each arrival precise, each departure exactly 15 minutes later, a small, discreet parcel clutched by the departing figure. The puzzle pieces slammed together with sickening force. The caustic air, the nocturnal ballet, the metronomic visits. An ugly truth bloomed in my gut. A poison was being brewed next door, right beside Elara's rose bushes. Flight screamed through my veins. Pack, warn Elara, vanish back to the city's anonymous clamor. Yet, a stubborn countercurrent held me fast. Was it the violation of this gentle place? A nascent protectiveness for my absent aunt? Or perhaps the dark, undeniable allure of the forbidden? I remained, transforming into an unwilling chronicler, scribbling times, descriptions, capturing blurry, inadequate images on my phone, a pathetic spy caught in a web not of my making. My third day playing detective, under the guise of hanging laundry on the line, admittedly craning for a glimpse of the forbidden zone, a harsh voice cracked the afternoon stillness. "Oi! You!" A figure detached itself from the neighboring property line, broad-shouldered, etched with ink that snaked up powerful arms, eyes like chips of ice boring into me. He cleared the dilapidated fence, separating the properties in a single predatory bound. The air around him reeked of stale tobacco and the familiar sharp chemical taint. "Been watching," he stated, no query in his tone, just cold accusation. My denial lodged in my throat, transparently false. "Just looking after my aunt's place." A humorless twist of his lips. "Right. And you always stare holes into empty houses." He advanced. I instinctively retreated, the damp laundry suddenly heavy in my hands. "Listen." His voice dropped, intimate and cold, raising the hairs on my neck. "What you think you saw didn't happen. We ain't here. Got it?" A silent, terrified nod was my only possible answer. "Good." His gaze lingered, sharp and assessing. "'Cause if word gets out, anyone..." The unspoken consequence vibrated between us, thick and dangerous. He turned, vaulted back over the fence with unnerving ease, leaving me paralyzed amidst the flapping sheets, the scent of danger clinging heavy to the afternoon air. Sleep was a forgotten country that night. I huddled by the window, a prisoner of shadows and sounds magnified by terror. Every creak of the old house, every rustle of leaves outside, sent jolts of adrenaline through me. The chemical ghost intensified, searing my sinuses, pounding behind my eyes. Logic screamed for retreat, for distance, for the anonymous safety of the authorities. Yet, something anchored me. Responsibility, perhaps foolish pride, a stubborn refusal to be chased off by thugs polluting Ilara's sanctuary. As darkness deepened, resolve hardened within the fear. I needed proof, irrefutable, something tangible to shatter their poisonous secrecy. Past midnight's nadir, when the world seemed to hold its breath, I slipped from Ilara's house into a landscape etched in moonlight and cricket song. My own heartbeat thundered against the silence as I traversed the damp grass towards the derelict Briarwood Place, a black maw against the starry sky. Around back, a window gaped slightly ajar, an invitation or a trap, a scramble, a squeeze, heart pounding like a drum against my ribs, and I was inside. The stench assaulted me, a physical blow driving tears to my eyes, fired to my throat. My shirt became a useless filter against the fumes. I stood in a desecrated kitchen, now a hellscape of stained glassware, jury-rigged heating elements, tubs brimming with noxious fluids. On a scarred table lay obscene piles of currency stacked beside plastic bags, shimmering with crystalline poison. Meth. My phone trembled in my grip as I documented the squalor, the apparatus of corruption, the glittering venom, the stacks of ill-gotten wealth. Intent on my task, the crunch of tires on gravel outside barely registered until I was almost too late. Raw panic flared, cold and sharp. A desperate scan, a dingy closet tucked into a corner. I plunged inside, pulling the door almost closed just as footsteps echoed and the back door swung open. Through the narrow slit, I watched as two men entered. One was Income's, his presence filling the space with menace. The other was unfamiliar, older, impeccably dressed in clothes that seemed utterly alien in this ruin, radiating an aura of cold authority. "Smooth operation," Income's reported, his voice rough. "Next yield on schedule for Friday." The older man surveyed the scene, his gaze sharp and appraising. "Excellent. And the neighbors? No complications?" A flicker of hesitation from Income's. "One potential issue. The woman next door, the house sitter, keeps watching. I put the fear in her, but..." The older man's face became granite. "No buts, no loose ends. Handle it." Ice flooded my veins. Me. They meant me. They were discussing my elimination as casually as discussing the weather. Ink Arms gave a curt, subservient nod. "Consider it done." The conversation drifted to logistics, profits, distribution routes, details lost on me as my thoughts screamed for escape, for survival. An age seemed to pass in that suffocating closet before their voices receded, the back door closed, and silence returned, heavy and menacing. I counted frantic heartbeats in the suffocating dark before daring to push the closet door open. My limbs felt like water, trembling uncontrollably, but adrenaline propelled me back to the window. A shout erupted behind me as I tumbled out. I didn't look, didn't pause, just flew across the dew-slicked grass, a terrified wraith seeking sanctuary. Inside Alara's house, the bolt slid home with a trembling click. I collapsed against the solid wood of the door, the dam finally breaking in shuddering, silent sobs. When the storm passed, my phone felt heavy, potent in my hand. 911. Emergency dispatch. What is the nature of your emergency? A ragged breath. I need to report. Something significant. Something dangerous. At the old Briarwood place. The ensuing hours dissolved into a maelstrom of flashing blue and red, shattering the rural calm like fragile glass. Questions blurred, voices overlapping as I watched from the relative safety of Alara's living room window, a spectator at the demolition of the night's poisonous peace. Tactical teams breached the Briarwood place, swallowing the darkness within. Near dawn, a weary officer, etched with the night's fatigue, but his eyes alight with success, approached me. "You did well, Silas," he said, the words grounding. "This outfit? We've been circling them for months. Your intel, those pictures, they cracked it wide open." He spoke of formal statements, of procedures needing to be followed. "And," he added gently, his gaze serious, "it would be wise to find another place to stay for a bit, for safety's sake." He was right, of course. I was the frayed thread in the unraveled tapestry, easily snipped. Packing my bags felt surreal, the mundane action jarring against the night's terror. A hollow laugh escaped me. I'd sought sanctuary from urban frenzy and stumbled headlong into a crucible. This gentle farmhouse, Ilara's haven, now bore an invisible scar in my memory, the phantom chemical tang, a persistent memorial to innocence lost. Driving away from the cordon of official vehicles, the flashing lights receding in my rearview mirror, a strange clarity settled over me. Life rarely adheres to blueprints. Sometimes it pitches you headfirst into the storm without warning, and in the thrashing water, you discover reserves you never knew existed, the capacity to navigate the treacherous currents when sinking is not an option. I hadn't found the tranquility I craved, but I had unearthed a hidden resilience, affirmed the simple gravity of choosing action over apathy, even when terrified. Before me, the asphalt ribboned into the unknown dawn, full of unwritten possibilities, and for the first time since that first alien scent tainted the air, I drew a full, clean breath. The initial ring I dismissed as digital detritus, a phantom signal in the ether. The third, however, carved certainty into my marrow. Eyes were upon me. By the 10th shrill summons, the architecture of my existence felt irrevocably altered. It began under the bruised twilight of a Tuesday, home from the relentless rhythm of deadlines and discourse. I shed my shoes, the day's weight sloughing off with them as I surrendered to the couch's embrace. Respite beckoned. Take out the comforting glow of a familiar show. Then the phone's insistent cry, an unfamiliar constellation of digits. Usually, I let such calls dissolve into the void, but an inexplicable impulse guided my hand. Hello? My voice, tentative, braced for the drone of a solicitor or the apology of a misdial. Silence answered, thick and expectant. Just as impatience frayed my resolve, a voice seeped through the receiver, warped and metallic, like rusted gears grinding. Hello, Ilara, it rasped. Crimson becomes you today. Ice formed in my veins. My blouse, a vibrant crimson. How? Who is this? The demand tore from my throat, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. The line clicked, dead. I sat suspended, phone clutched like a talisman against unseen forces. Coincidence? A cruel jest spun by colleagues. A deeper instinct recoiled from such simple explanations. Rising, drawn by a primal need, I parted the curtains, scanning the street below. Familiarity offered no comfort. Parked vehicles slumbering curbside, a couple tethered to their dog, the mundane tableau of my quiet suburban enclave. Yet, a sinister varnish now coated everything. I secured the curtains, the deadbolts click, echoing unnaturally loud in the sudden stillness. My fingers trembled, dialing Chloe, my anchor. Hey, I began, striving for nonchalance. Did you, or anyone from the office, try some bizarre prank call just now? What? No. Ilara, why? What's happened? Confusion laced her tone. I recounted the chilling exchange. Chloe listened, her silence amplifying my fear. That's deeply unsettling, Ilara. Perhaps you should involve the authorities. The thought flickered, then died. What tangible evidence could I offer? A peculiar call? Dismissal felt inevitable. Block the number, they'd advise. So, I attempted to bury the unease, ordered sustenance, summoned the flickering escape of the screen, tried to stitch the frayed edges of normalcy back together. An hour bled away. The phone erupted anew. Same anonymous signature. This time, silence was my shield. 4 rings echoed, then ceased. A heartbeat later, my screen illuminated. Why didn't you answer, Alara? Don't you want to converse? My hand spasmed, the phone skittering across the sofa cushions. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. Retrieving the device, I navigated numbly to block the caller. Then, plunging the apartment into darkness, I became a silhouette behind the fabric barrier, peering through a sliver of vision at the street. No lurking figures, no idling cars radiating malice, only the persistent, suffocating certainty of being perceived. Sleep offered no sanctuary. Each creak of the building, each sigh of the wind became a potential footfall, every shadow a waiting presence. Dawn arrived, not as a relief, but as a harsh spotlight on my exhaustion and frayed nerves. I feigned illness, whispering excuses into the phone to my workplace. The thought of navigating the public sphere, exposed, vulnerable to any gaze, was unbearable. Around noon, the phone sang its discordant song again, a different unknown number. I let the call bleed into the digital void of voicemail. A minute ticked past. A new message materialized. Staying sequestered today, Alara. Wise. But sanctuary is temporary. With a strangled cry, I hurled the phone. It struck the opposing wall, clattering ignominiously to the floor. Madness. Sheer, unadulterated madness. How could they know? Were unseen lenses embedded in my walls? Was an observer stationed nearby? The following hour became a frantic, fruitless excavation of my own space, searching for hidden eyes, listening ears. Nothing. The absence of discovery offered no solace. The digital assault persisted throughout the day. Each call, each text, a more intimate violation, a sharper threat. That pizza you summoned last night looked delectable. Perhaps we should share one soon. Your mother would be so profoundly disappointed if she knew the truth of last summer. Does your superior grasp the nature of those files you accessed after hours, I wonder? How? The pizza. Plausible perhaps, with surveillance of the building. But my mother? The transgression at work. This knowledge transcended mere observation. It bespoke an unnerving intimacy with my hidden life. By evening, I was a ruin, pacing the confines of my apartment, untouched food cooling, unbathed, jumping at phantoms. Then, the final summons. This time answering, I heard no distortion, only the smooth cadence of a cultured male voice. "Hello, Alara," it purred. "I believe it's time we became acquainted, don't you?" "Who are you?" The question was a threadbare whisper. "What is it you require of me?" A low chuckle resonated, sending tendrils of ice down my spine. "Oh, Ilara, it isn't about my requirements. It's about what you are going to provide for me." "I'm contacting the police," I bluffed, the words brittle with forced bravado. "No," he countered, his calm a terrifying counterpoint to my panic. "You won't, because doing so would compel me to disseminate some rather compelling information to certain interested parties, information concerning the true fate of your father's enterprise, concerning the actual destination of those funds." My blood turned to slush. Impossible. How could he know? The meticulous layers of concealment, the carefully erased tracks. What do you want? The question was surrender, stripped bare. 5th and Main, the corner. 1 hour, he dictated. Attend alone. Failure to comply will precipitate unpleasantries for you and for those you hold dear. The line went dead. I stood frozen, thoughts colliding like frantic atoms. Flight. Where could I possibly flee from someone who seemingly knew the contours of my soul? The police? His threat hung heavy, a poisoned promise. In the end, only one path seemed navigable. I scribbled a desperate account of everything, sealing it in an envelope bearing Chloe's name, leaving it starkly visible on my kitchen table. Keys in hand, I stepped out into the night. The city streets were subdued as I drove, a fine mist beginning to descend, lending the world a spectral, dreamlike quality. Parking a block shy of the intersection, I walked, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs. Beneath the jaundiced glow of streetlight, a figure waited. Tall, impeccably dressed, salt and pepper hair, framing a face that could belong to a benevolent uncle or a titan of industry. Nothing like the monster my fear had conjured. He offered a smile as I drew near, a gesture that failed to thaw the glacier calculation in his eyes. Alara, he greeted, extending a hand. A pleasure to finally meet you. I ignored the proffered hand. What do you want? My voice, scarcely audible. That chilling chuckle returned. Direct. I appreciate that. What I want, Alara, is elementary. I require your unique talents for a small undertaking. What kind of undertaking? He produced a sleek USB drive, holding it aloft like a dark sacrament. Contained herein, names, account numbers. I need you to perform your specialty. Obscure the origins, cleanse the flow, as you did for your father. Nausea surged. He wanted me to launder money, to employ the very skills that had woven this suffocating net around me. And if I decline? I asked, the answer already echoing in the hollows of my chest. His smile sharpened, becoming predatory. Then the calls commence, to the constabulary, to your employers, to your mother. Imagine her reaction, learning the true nature of her daughter. I closed my eyes, the walls of the trap solidifying around me. This was it. The past, patient and relentless, had finally cornered its quarry. All right, I conceded, meeting his gaze, a flicker of defiance rekindling. I'll do it. But upon completion, you vanish. No more calls, no more threats. We conclude. He inclined his head, pressing the drive into my palm. Naturally, execute this task proficiently, and I become a mere phantom. As my fingers closed around the cool metal, a reckless, desperate stratagem sparked within me. How can I be certain you won't simply continue this coercion? An eyebrow arched. You cannot. But what alternative exists for you? I nodded, mimicking acquiescence. Then, With sudden, fluid violence, I seized his wrist, twisting sharply, a maneuver Chloe had drilled into me years prior. A strangled cry of surprise and agony escaped him. His phone tumbled free. Snatching it, I fled. Behind me, his enraged shouts pursued me, his heavy footfalls slapping against the slick pavement. I ran with a ferocity I hadn't known I possessed, lungs searing, legs screaming protest. 3 blocks dissolved in a blur of adrenaline and desperation until the stoic facade of the police station loomed. Gasping, I burst through the doors, stumbling towards the duty sergeant. "I need to report a crime," I choked out, laying both USB drives, his and mine, upon the worn counter. "And I need to confess to one." The sergeant regarded me, then the drives, his expression a mixture of bafflement and professional concern. "Very well, miss," he stated evenly. "Perhaps you should begin at the commencement." And so, I did. The narrative spilled forth, the insidious cause, the escalating fear, the blackmail, the long-buried secret of my father's finances. It was an agonizing catharsis, the deliberate dismantling of my own future. Yet, with each divulged secret, an immense pressure eased within my chest. No more concealment, no more scanning the shadows. They arrested me, naturally, and apprehended him later, attempting to abscond from the city, a known predator, it transpired, with similar operations trailing him across 3 states. As they guided me towards a holding cell, my reflection flickered in a polished surface. Exhausted, undeniably frightened, yet strangely unburdened. The nightmare, spanning days, and in truth, years, had finally broken. The path ahead remains obscured. Trials await. Incarceration seems probable. But for the first time in what feels like an eternity, I can draw a full, untainted breath. The phone will remain silent, its potential for menace neutralized. The shadows are merely shadows once more. Though confined, a peculiar liberation has settled upon me. The only voice demanding an answer now is my own. That resonant thud of oak meeting frame, the sound that sealed us within Ashworth House, echoed not just in the hall, but in the hollow pit of my stomach. Instant regret, a fool's dare, hatched in youthful bravado, had delivered us, trembling, onto the doorstep of a legend, the kind whispered about in hushed tones, a place that swallowed visitors whole. The warnings had been there, spectral murmurs on the edge of hearing, ignored. Elias, they call me. I once wore bravery like a cheap coat, easily shed in the face of true cold. That night, inside Ashworth House, it evaporated entirely. 5 souls adrift on a Halloween escapade. Myself, Clara, whose hand felt suddenly fragile in mine, our steadfast companions Finn and Maya, and Finn's younger sibling, Leo, still navigating the shoals of high school, while the rest of us pretended at worldly college wisdom. Invincible. We were brittle glass, poised to shatter. Ashworth House squatted before us, a skeletal Victorian silhouette against the bruised twilight sky, seeming to drink the thin moonlight rather than cast it back. Its skin of paint blistered and curled. Vacant eyes stared from boarded-up windows. Each footfall on the porch provoked a groan from the decaying timbers. Anyone feeling repentant? Finn offered, his laugh a brittle thing. We arranged our features into masks of courage, though the fear was a shared electric current between us. It pulsed in my own chest. We committed, I counted, the words tasting like bravado and dust. Let's honor the pact. I produced the archaic key, a relic obtained from Silas Croft, the house's reluctant guardian. It grated in the lock with a sound unnervingly like splintering bone before the heavy door yielded, sighing open onto a cavern of dust motes dancing in our flashlight beams. The air hung thick, cloying with the perfume of rot and an unidentifiable, unsettling sweetness. We crossed the threshold. Behind us, the door slammed with a resonant finality that jolted every nerve. Maya's attempt at reassurance, just the draft, surely, trembled, betraying her. An hour bled away as we navigated the ground floor, our flashlights carving hesitant paths through the gloom. We catalogued the groans and sighs of the ancient structure, assigning them mundane causes, settling timbers, the wind's complaint. Yet, an undeniable wrongness permeated the space, a low hum beneath the threshold of hearing that tightened my nerves. It was young Leo who broke the fragile normalcy. Elias, everyone. His voice was a threadbare whisper. The portraits. Our beams converged on the gallery of ancestors lining the corridor. Conventional at first glance, austere figures draped in the fashions of bygone eras, but scrutiny revealed the shared, chilling detail. Lurking in the shadowed periphery of each painted scene, half concealed, stood a silhouette, featureless, save for eyes, pinpricks of malice that seemed to track our movements, luminous and aware. Pareidolia, I muttered, the lie feeling like ash on my tongue. Shadows playing tricks. Precisely then, it drifted down from the upper reaches, the unmistakable sound of a child's giggle, sharp and incongruous in the dead silence. We became statues carved from ice, eyes wide. We are alone, aren't we? Clara breathed, her fingers crushing mine. Before denial could form, the laughter pealed again, closer now, chased by the frantic patter of small feet drumming on the floorboards directly overhead. Out! Leo choked, his face a mask of stark white in the flashlight's glare. Now! We spun towards the entrance, a united surge of sudden, desperate need for escape. But the heavy oak door stood impassive, refusing our frantic shoves and pulls, solid, immovable, as if welded to its frame. Panic, cold and sharp, began its insidious crawl. The windows, assaulted next, proved equally stubborn, rattling uselessly in their sashes. A terrifying certainty dawned. Ashworth House did not intend for us to leave. Right, composure, Finn managed, though a tremor roughened his voice. Another exit. Must be. Kitchen, cellar. We'll split. No! Maya cut him off, her voice sharp with conviction. Are you insane? Standard horror trope number 1. Never split the party. Her logic, grim as it was, felt irrefutable. Together then, we would press onward, seeking an alternative escape route. The grand staircase beckoned, each upward step plunging us into a deepening chill. The air grew frigid, stealing our breath, which plumed visibly before us. An absurdity on this otherwise mild autumn evening. The second-floor landing presented a corridor of closed doors, a silent gauntlet. As we crept past, phantom sounds seemed to bleed from beneath them, fragments of hushed argument, choked weeping, and once, chillingly distinct, a shriek of pure agony that sent us stumbling back against each other. We selected a door, seemingly at random, and nudged it inward. A bedchamber, swathed in dust and draped in cobwebs, lay revealed. Dominating the far wall, however, was a large, ornate mirror. Its surface captured our huddled forms, yet warped the image disturbingly. Reflected back were figures recognizably us, yet aged decades, faces skeletal with terror, garments ripped and soiled. A blink, a frantic refocusing, the grotesque vision vanished, leaving only our present selves staring back, wide-eyed. But the psychic residue of that horror lingered. "You saw?" I whispered. Pale nods answered me. We retreated hastily from the room, shuffling backward into the corridor, only to find our path blocked. A small girl materialized before us, impossibly still, clad in a spotless white frock, her dark hair meticulously plaited. Ordinary, perhaps, were she not utterly translucent, the wall visible through her slight form. Leo gasped, stumbling away. The apparition offered a smile, a rictus revealing teeth unnaturally long and needle-sharp. "Play with me?" The voice was a discordant echo, seeming to come from everywhere at once. Before coherent thought could return, she dissolved into nothingness, her chilling laughter hanging in the icy air like frost. That was the catalyst. The house erupted. Doors slammed open and shut along the corridor with percussive violence. Unseen forces hurled trinkets and debris across rooms, objects whistling past our ears. The temperature plunged further still, our exhalations now thick, frozen vapor. Survival instinct took over. Exit forgotten, we simply fled the escalating pandemonium, scrambling upward, ever upward, finally spilling into the relative quiet of the attic. Below, the cacophony raged on. We huddled together amidst the rafters and forgotten relics. "Elias, what now?" Clara wept, her grip on my arm bruising. I held no answers. The leader, the brave one, stripped bare. I was merely another terrified soul lost in the storm. My flashlight beam, trembling, caught intricate carvings etched into the attic floorboards. They formed a precise circle encompassing our huddled group, emitting a faint, ethereal luminescence. "Look," I managed, my voice raspy. "These markings, a circle, protection." Confirmation arrived immediately. A concentration of shadow, darker than the ambient gloom, hurled itself towards us, only to recoil violently as if striking an unseen wall. A shriek of pure, thwarted malice tore through the attic, a sound that resonated deep within my bones. And so began the siege. For untold hours, trapped within that glowing boundary, we bore witness. Shapes coalesced and dissolved in the oppressive darkness just beyond our reach, some disturbingly anthropomorphic, others nightmarish geometries. defying description. Their constant, palpable hunger, their ceaseless attempts to breach our fragile sanctuary, became the rhythm of our terror. With the first hint of dawn painting the sky beyond the grimy attic window, the assault intensified into a final desperate frenzy. The entire structure shuddered around us. Dust and debris rained from the rafters. The chorus of howls and screams escalated to an unbearable crescendo. Then, silence. Abrupt, absolute, and profound. Pale fingers of sunlight pierced the gloom, and miraculously, the suffocating weight that had crushed us all night began to dissipate. Hesitantly, stiffly, we descended the stairs. Below, bathed in the gentle glow of early morning, the massive front door stood ajar, spilling golden light into the foyer. We needed no urging. We bolted, bursting out onto the dew-kissed, overgrown lawn, gasping the clean, sweet air like drowning swimmers reaching the surface. Silas Croft stood sentinel near the gate, his weathered face impassive, unsurprised by our ragged emergence. "You're out, then," he observed, his voice raspy like dry leaves. "More than most can claim." A barrage of frantic questions tumbled from our lips. Explanations, reasons, the nature of the house's malignancy. He merely offered a slow shake of his head. "There's knowledge best left buried," he stated flatly. "You've glimpsed what lies beyond the curtain. Best advice, try to forget and never, ever return." Forget? Impossible. The night's horrors were branded onto our psyches, altering the very fabric of our beings in ways still unfolding. We 5 survivors rarely speak of Ashworth House now, yet, sometimes, in the deepest hours, the phone will ring. An unspoken understanding passes between us. Finn, Maya, Leo, Clara, myself. We simply hold the line, the sound of another's breathing, a fragile anchor, a testament to shared survival. Yet, solitude breeds doubt. In the quiet vulnerability of night, a chilling question surfaces. Did we truly escape Ashworth House unscathed? Or did some fragment of its darkness latch onto us, a silent passenger biding its moment to drag us back into that abyss? I resist the thought, push it down. But every year, as October deepens and the air grows thin, that sense of being watched returns. I find myself glancing back, half anticipating the translucent figure of the girl, her sharp-toothed smile, her echoing invitation to play. A cold dread grips me then, the fear that perhaps one day, worn down by the memory, some broken part of me might just acquiesce, for the veil, once lifted, can never be truly lowered again. And sometimes, drifting on the edge of sleep, I am certain I hear it. A child's laughter, faint and distant, echoing from the shadows of my own mind. The instant the furniture began its silent migration, I sensed this house-sitting arrangement would unravel into something far beyond the mundane. What commenced as a simple courtesy for my neighbor soon warped into a harrowing waltz with forces utterly alien, leaving my grasp on reality frayed and my very essence imperiled. My name is Alara. Until last month, I navigated the predictable currents of a 25-year-old's existence, chasing solvency in the sprawling metropolis. When Ms. Eldridge, my elderly neighbor dwelling in the adjacent Victorian behemoth inquired if I might oversee her residence during a week-long visit to her sister. I seized the opportunity. A tranquil week sequestered within the embrace of a beautiful, time-worn manse, distant from the perpetual din of my flatmates. It whispered of paradise. Had I possessed an inkling of the sentience breathing behind those ornate walls, I would have fled. The initial day drifted by uneventfully. I wandered the labyrinthine corridors, lost in admiration of the antique contours of the furniture, the intricate filigree of the woodwork. Miss Eldridge had provided meticulous directives concerning her verdant charges and the feeding schedule of her aloof feline companion, Jasper. Everything appeared deceptively straightforward. It was the second night when the fabric of normalcy began to fray. As I surrendered to the threshold of sleep, a distinct thump resonated from the floor below. Assuming Jasper had instigated some nocturnal mischief, I descended to investigate. Upon entering the drawing room, however, inertia seized me. The ponderous oak coffee table, previously anchored in the room's heart, now stood flush against the far wall, not merely nudged, but transposed entirely across the expanse. What conceivable? The words died on my lips as my gaze swept the room, seeking explanation. Nothing. No marring scratches upon the polished floorboards, no trace of Jasper's passage. A desperate attempt at rationalization surfaced. Perhaps fatigue clouded my perception, blurring the memory of the table's placement. With considerable effort, I wrestled it back to its presumed original station and retreated upstairs, a cold knot of unease tightening in my stomach. The following morning, I endeavored to dismiss the incident as a figment of an overtired mind. Yet, descending the staircase towards breakfast, a fresh discordance assaulted my senses. The portraits lining the hallway hung askew, tilted at capricious angles, as though a mischievous hand had deliberately disrupted their alignment. My pulse quickened. I knew, with unshakable certainty, they had hung perfectly straight the previous day. I'd even remarked to Miss Eldridge on the immaculate order of her home. As my trembling hands rectified the crooked frames, another anomaly snagged my attention. In one corner of the drawing room, previously occupied by naught but bare, patterned wallpaper, now stood a door. Diminutive, almost child-sized, its surface was a tapestry of elaborate, unsettling carvings. I approached with hesitant steps, fascination wrestling with a suffocating dread. Extending a hand towards the tarnished knob, I could have sworn whispers coiled from beyond the wood, faint yet undeniably present. My hand recoiled as if scorched. Impossible. Doors do not simply materialize from vacant walls. Shutting my eyes, I inhaled deeply, counting slowly to 10. When I opened them, the door had vanished. The remainder of the day unfolded under a pall of nervous tension, each creak and groan of the old house amplifying my anxiety. I sought refuge in cleaning, yet an inescapable sensation of being observed dogged my every move. The painted eyes within the portraits seemed to track my progress, and fleeting glimpses of motion flickered at the periphery of my vision, dissolving into nothingness the moment I turned. Sleep offered no sanctuary that night. Each time consciousness threatened to ebb, a jolt would seize me. phantom footsteps echoing in the corridor, the spectral brush of unseen fingers against my skin. By dawn, I was afraid, nerve-ending. I resolved to call Miss Eldridge to recount the unsettling phenomena and withdraw from the arrangement. Yet, as I described the migrating furniture, the ephemeral door, she merely emitted a soft chuckle. "Oh, that's merely the house settling, my dear," she purred through the line. "It possesses its little quirks, nothing whatsoever to fret about." But an undercurrent laced her tone, a subtle inflection of amusement. It sowed a seed of doubt, a suspicion she harbored, knowledge she chose not to divulge. As the days bled one into the next, the strangeness intensified, escalating from unsettling to overtly hostile. Books launched themselves from shelves as I passed. Pockets of unnatural cold materialized abruptly in certain rooms, my breath misting in the frigid air. And the whispers, they became a constant susurrus, an indistinct murmuring, perpetually teasing the edge of comprehension. Symbols began to bloom upon the surfaces around me, arcane, sigil-like markings that seemed to writhe and shift when observed indirectly. They infested the patterns of the wallpaper, were etched like scars into the floorboards, shimmered fleetingly in the depths of mirrors. One night, sleep proving utterly elusive, I turned to research. Hunched over my laptop, I delved into the history of the imposing structure. The information unearthed sent a glacial chill down my spine. The house was erected in the late 19th century by one Mordecai Thorne, Miss Eldridge's great-grandfather. Local lore whispered of his immersion in occult rituals, of clandestine midnight assemblies where dissonant chants spilled into the surrounding neighborhood. Legend claimed Mordecai had forged a pact with an unnamed entity, bartering promises of power and longevity for a continuous tribute of sacrifices. The accounts were fragmented, yet over decades, scores of individuals had vanished without trace in the vicinity of the Thorne estate. As I absorbed these chilling narratives, the whispers encircling me swelled, growing louder, more insistent. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was madness, an elaborate, cruel hoax, perhaps, or the onset of a psychological collapse. Yet, a deeper certainty resonated within me. The events unfolding within this house were terrifyingly real, possessed of a malevolence exceeding my darkest imaginings. The following day, the small door reappeared. This time, it manifested in my bedroom, and this time, it stood ajar. Through the opening, I beheld not wood or plaster, but a swirling vortex of profound darkness, intermittently illuminated by flashes of spectral, unearthly light. The whispers emanating from its depths were clearer now, seductive promises of power, enlightenment, the fulfillment of unspoken desires. If only I would step across the threshold. I stood mesmerized, an almost irresistible magnetism drawing me towards the aperture. Surrender seemed intoxicatingly simple, an effortless slide into the waiting void. Then, a soft meow broke the spell. Jasper sat at my feet, his large amber eyes fixed upon me with startling intensity. In that instant, the enchantment shattered. Scooping the cat into my arms, I ran, propelled by raw terror, not pausing until I burst from the house and found myself breathless, halfway down the street. The final days of the week blurred past in the sterile anonymity of a motel room, my only returns to the house, brief, necessary excursions to replenish Jasper's food and water. With each visit, the oppressive wrongness intensified. The symbols pulsed with greater prominence. The whispers clawed more audibly at the silence. The very air seemed thick and viscous with a predatory energy. When Ms. Eldridge returned, I awaited her arrival, steeled for confrontation, desperate for answers. But the moment our eyes met, I knew. Her gaze held the same ancient, otherworldly luminescence I had glimpsed swirling within the impossible doorway. "Did you find your stay agreeable, dear?" she inquired, her smile stretching just a fraction too wide, too knowing. "The house appears to have developed quite an affinity for you." A choked, incoherent excuse tumbled from my lips before I fled, my legs trembling so violently I could barely navigate the path. As I drove away, a final glance in the rearview mirror captured Miss Eldridge standing on the porch. For a fleeting, horrifying second, her familiar form seemed to shimmer, ripple, revealing something vast, ancient, and utterly terrifying beneath the benign, grandmotherly facade. A month has elapsed. I inhabit a new apartment in a different city, yet the tendrils of that week refuse to release their grip. Sometimes, in the profound stillness of night, the whispers return, insidious invitations echoing from the shadowed corners of my room. And sometimes, behind closed eyelids, I see it. The small, intricately carved door, patiently waiting. What lies beyond its threshold, I cannot fathom. What price Miss Eldridge, if that name ever truly belonged to her, paid for the power radiating from her ancient eyes, remains obscure. But one truth has branded itself onto my soul. Some doors are inviolable sanctuaries of darkness, never meant to be breached. Some thresholds exist only to be shunned, because once you have peered into that abyss, once you have heard the siren song whispering from the void, it becomes an indelible part of you. And somewhere, nestled within a beautiful Victorian mansion harboring a monstrous secret, a small door waits, perpetually poised, anticipating the arrival of another soul curious enough, or desperate enough, to turn the knob. I pray, with every fiber of my being, that soul will never again be mine. Deep within the municipal archives, down where the air hung thick and motionless as trap time, I labored late one Tuesday. The subterranean levels hummed with a silence that felt ancient. My task, assigned by Ms. Thorne, involved sifting through strata of forgotten files, boxes untouched for what seemed like generations. "Call the dross," she'd instructed, but a reluctance stayed my hand. Discarding history, even bureaucratic detritus, felt premature without scrutiny. Thus, I unearthed it. A simple shoebox, unexpectedly heavy, containing cassette tapes. Personal mementos, perhaps? A defunct employee's audio diary. Then, a label snagged my attention, stark against the plastic shell. March 14th, 2026. A date yet unborn, suspended more than a year beyond our present, 2025. The tape felt unnaturally cold, or perhaps unnaturally warm in my palm. A knot tightened low in my gut. Heat prickled the back of my neck. An error, surely. A misprint. A forgotten office prank. Reason scrabbled for purchase, yet I carried the cassette toward the cramped adjunct office, tucked away at the basement's terminus. There, cloaked in dust and grime, sat a relic, an old tape player. My fingers trembled slightly as I pried open the deck. A faint squeal protested the movement. I slotted the cassette inside. Play. Hiss erupted, a sound like static rain. Then a voice pierced through. My voice, unmistakably mine. "Standing here," it murmured, the cadence eerily familiar. "In the corner of my living room, phone's ringing. Decide if I should answer." The recording meandered through the mundane landscape of a future moment, mentioning the specific fair trade blend I'd only adopted the previous week, detailing anxieties about an upcoming presentation I hadn't yet fully prepared. It concluded with a casual note about a minor power disruption expected at my apartment complex. Around 9, the voice specified, the following evening. My mouth turned to parchment. A vice clamped around my ribs. Was I fracturing? My mind finally succumbing to the archive's oppressive solitude. I scanned the small, dim office, half anticipating a hidden camera, a grinning colleague leaping from the shadows. Nothing. Only the stale air, the humming machine, and the impossible tape. I ejected it, turning it over, inspecting the label anew. March 14th, 2026. Still defiant of chronology. I tried to rationalize. A vocal similarity, a strange coincidence. Homeward bound, the disembodied words echoed relentlessly. A hastily assembled dinner, the television flickering, ignored, did little to quell the rising tide of unease. My thoughts orbited the tape, a dark satellite. Time crawled toward 9 p.m., each minute checked with obsessive frequency. 9:03 p.m. The lights held steady. Relief washed over me, sharp and sudden, followed by a self-deprecating chuckle, spooked by shadows. Then, at 9:07 p.m., the apartment plunged into abrupt darkness, a breathless pause, 10 seconds maybe, before the power surged back, lamps flaring accusingly. I remained seated, staring, my heart a frantic drum against my sternum, a sheen of cold sweat blooming on my forehead. The tape had called it. Not a cataclysm, just a flicker, precise and predicted. My hands began to shake. For 30 minutes, I paced the confines of my apartment, a caged animal seeking escape from an undeniable truth. Coincidence felt too thin a shield. The following morning drew me back to the archive's depths with magnetic force. Routine tasks blurred. My gaze kept straying to the shoebox, a Pandora's container on the metal desk. Surrender felt inevitable. I examined the other cassettes. Dates scattered across future months, future years. Some bore no dates, only terse inscriptions in what was chillingly, undeniably my own script. The meeting. The car. The leak. A tremor started in my chest, climbing into my throat. My lips felt dry, tight. I selected the meeting, fed it to the dusty player. Again, my voice, dislocated from time. It spoke of an impending summons from Ms. Thorne, head of the archives. It detailed a new project assignment, the specific weave of her blazer, the exact flavor of frustration I would taste. The recording closed with my future self sighing. I walk out of that room knowing I can't escape this situation. Gooseflesh pebbled my arms. The wall clock showed nearly noon. Miss Thorne had indeed mentioned wanting to see me at 1 regarding next quarter's initiatives. A familiar constriction seized my throat. Sweat beaded beneath my collar. Ignore it, I commanded myself. Witness reality unfiltered. At 10 minutes to 1, I ascended the stairs, chest hollow, ears ringing faintly. The meeting commenced precisely on the hour. Ms. Thorne wore a charcoal grey blazer. She spoke of departmental restructuring, a more demanding role for me, using the exact phrase, "new project." My palms grew slick against the chair's worn arms. Every forecasted detail clicked into place. I walked out, just as the tape foretold, feeling cornered, drained, ensnared. Returning to the basement felt like descending into my own psyche. Corridor lights flickered erratically, amplifying a nascent paranoia. Was I observed? My back muscles clenched as I pushed open the heavy fire door. The shoebox waited. A desperate urge to incinerate the tapes warred with an equally potent need to understand. A cold knot formed in my stomach as I loaded another cassette. This one marked simply, "Work," in black ink. My voice spilled out again, narrating the coming days. A minor spat with Jenna over misfiled documents, a scalded hand from the break room coffee machine, and then something truly unsettling, the discovery of a hidden passage in the basement leading to a section I never knew existed. My breath hitched. Surely not. The tape described tripping on a loose floor tile, stumbling against the far wall, activating a hidden mechanism, a section swinging inward, revealing an older, forgotten annex. I shook my head, resistant belief. The next day unfolded with unnerving fidelity. Jenna materialized, irritation etched on his face, complaining about a mislabeled box delaying his inventory. A brief, tense exchange, precisely as predicted. Calm frayed at the edges. A subtle tremor took root in my hands. Later, fetching coffee, the machine sputtered violently, splashing scalding water onto my left hand. A sharp curse, the sting under cold running water. Another prophecy fulfilled. Concentration became elusive, simple tasks fraught with anticipatory tension. That afternoon, navigating the basement labyrinth with a precarious stack of binders, my foot caught on a loose tile. I lurched, instinctively bracing myself against the far wall. My palm connected. A faint click. The wall section yielded, shifting inward perhaps 2 inches. My heart leaped, a frantic bird against my ribs. I pushed again. The panel pivoted smoothly on concealed hinges, releasing a gust of musty, tomb-like air. My flashlight, snatched from a nearby shelf, cut a trembling beam into the void. Rows of decaying crates, rust-eaten shelving, drifts of ancient paper. Deeper within this forgotten ventricle of the building, a small desk stood in shadow, attended by a broken chair. On the desk, another cassette player, different model, equally shrouded in neglect. I nudged the chair aside. A tightness constricted my chest as I lifted the player. Its power cord frayed like an old nerve. Beside it lay a scattering of unlabeled tapes, identical in brand to those in the shoebox. Adrenaline surged, hot and metallic. My head felt light, my breathing shallow. What truths or horrors awaited deeper exploration? A profound weakness invaded my legs. I retreated, pulling the secret door closed, my trembling hands leaving faint prints on the cool, disguised surface. Back at my designated desk, I fought for composure. The tapes weren't suggestion, they were scripture. My voice, my future self, chronicled events with chilling accuracy. Denial was no longer viable. My heart hammered as I contemplated the implications. Rummaging through the shoebox, I counted them. 20 tapes in total. Dates spanning weeks, months, years ahead. Cryptic labels hinting at unknown trials. One cassette bore today's date. Today. My temples throbbed as I slid it into the player, bracing myself. My voice emerged from the static hiss. Basement, around 5 p.m., too scared to open the next door. A pause, filled with the sound of my recorded self breathing unevenly. Keep checking the corridor. Make sure I'm alone. Heart pounding. Listening to myself describe this exact moment. Realize I can't avoid the next step. I stabbed the pause button. The wall clock read 4:55 p.m. My chest vibrated with a low hum of dread. Play. Teeth clenched. No, I can't destroy these tapes, the voice continued, weary, resigned. Try to find out who made them, why they exist, afraid of what comes next. Silence. The tape ended. My mouth was desert dry, blood pounding a frantic rhythm against my skull. I wrapped the tapes and the player in discarded newsprint, stuffed them into my duffel bag. A final check of the empty corridor, then hurried steps up the stairs, out into the fading light. The drive home was a blur of tension, the bag on the passenger seat radiating a palpable weight. Shoulders rigid, jaw aching from unconscious clenching, I forced my eyes toward the road, but my mind replayed the eerie loop of my own prophetic voice. Inside my apartment, locks clicked, windows secured. The cassette player sat accusingly on the kitchen table. One part of me craved oblivion, a dumpster miles away. Another part, insidious and strong, demanded knowledge, demanded I listen. The future, already scripted, lay coiled on those magnetic ribbons. Shaking, sweat trickling down my temples, I reached for a tape labeled "Next Week." Slid it in. Crackle. My voice detailed an encounter at the supermarket, bumping into a college acquaintance, discussing of all things, foundational issues in the archive building. It mentioned a specific crack near my basement desk I hadn't noticed. The recording ended. Realize these tapes are controlling me, but I can't stop listening. I slammed the stop button, breathing raggedly. The compulsion to hear more, to know the path laid out, was a powerful undertow. Days bled into confirmation. The grocery store rendezvous occurred, precise down to the small talk about structural integrity, while standing in the cereal aisle, my heart hammering, hands clammy on the cart. Each tape validated itself. Sleep offered no refuge, fractured by phantom echoes of my own voice in the darkness. Work became a minefield of nervous jumps and furtive glances. Sharing this burden felt impossible. Who would believe? The tapes accumulated in my apartment, a growing testament to my diminishing free will. I played them in secret, absorbing previews of conversations, city vignettes, nascent habits I'd inevitably adopt. Here I sit now, chronicling this descent. Tapes promising insights months, even years, from now lie dormant. The one labeled 1 year from now exerts a terrifying gravity. My legs tremble beneath the table. My hands are cold. Play it? Destroy it? Does it matter? Part of me yearns for an explanation. The origin, the mechanism. Another part fears that listening further only tightens the chains. My heart refuses to settle, a frantic captive in my chest as I stare at the pile of cassettes. Tomorrow, the secret room beckons. A clue, perhaps? A name? A photograph? Anything to unravel this temporal knot. Nausea churns at the prospect of returning to that dusty chamber, yet avoidance feels futile. The tapes dictate the future, my future, flawlessly. That first recording replays endlessly. The impossible foreknowledge, the swift, mundane confirmation. Every attempt to dismiss it, to reclaim agency, is countered by another perfect prediction. This isn't delusion. It's my voice, my life, pre-recorded, trapped. My heart pounds as these words find the page. The player to my right, the tapes to my left. Forehead damp, windows checked again, locked. The next cassette is labeled Tomorrow Night. Will it offer escape, or simply narrate the next turn of the screw? There seems no exit, only the relentless cycle. Press play, listen to myself, and wait for the inevitable unfolding. My life cleaved in two. Before the tapes and this terrifying, scripted after, it will never be the same. Curiosity, a knot tightening low in my belly, drew me onto the forsaken acreage. The earth itself seemed weary, choked with brittle weeds, the house a slumped silhouette against the pale sky. Its porch listed, a wounded limb, and the window panes stared blankly, filmed with years of dust. My purpose was academic, piecing together settlement histories for a research paper, yet the place hummed with a different kind of resonance. Stepping from my pickup, the silence was absolute, broken only by the wind's dry whisper through skeletal grass. An unnerving stillness clung to the air, as though time itself had snagged here decades ago. The barn beckoned first, its timber siding weathered to a splintered gray shroud. Inside, shadows clung thick and heavy. Broken implements lay discarded in corners like forgotten bones, the atmosphere dense with the scent of decay, mold, aged hay, something else indefinably old. Gossamer webs draped every surface, intricate traps shimmering faintly in the gloom. My stay was brief. The structure yielded nothing but a profound sense of abandonment, a hollow echo of lives long vanished. My notebook and camera felt inadequate tools against such palpable emptiness. The real investigation, I sensed, lay elsewhere. I turned towards the house, but my gaze snagged on something else. Tucked behind the dwelling, near a brooding cluster of skeletal trees, lay a circular anomaly, half obscured by a collapsed lattice of rotten timber. The planks were warped, stained dark with moisture and time. Even yards away, a damp, earthy odor drifted towards me. Closer inspection revealed a well, its collar fashioned from stones stacked with ancient precision, now dark with age and mottled with viridian moss. The boards lay across its mouth haphazardly, a crude deterrent against falling debris or unwary creatures. A strange magnetism emanated from it, pulling me closer. Leaning in, I squinted through the gaps, but the interior was an impenetrable void. The smell intensified, not mere dampness, but a cold, subterranean breath exhaling from the depths. Compelled, I decided to clear the opening. My crowbar found purchase under one plank. With a sharp crack, the rotted wood yielded. I tossed it aside. One by one, I wrestled the remaining boards free, exposing the well's dark maw. I'd anticipated the glint of water far below. Instead, there was only blackness, profound and seemingly infinite. Impulsively, I scooped a loose stone from the earth and dropped it into the void. I listened, waiting for the distant splash. What returned was not sound, but the ghost of one, a sibilance that slithered up from the depths. At first, I dismissed it as the clatter of the stone against the unseen walls, yet the quality was wrong. It possessed a peculiar cadence, less echo than utterance, impossibly distant. Confused, I stood frozen for a beat. A nervous cough escaped me. Seconds later, its echo returned, but warped, twisted, as if the darkness itself were trying to shape the sound into syllables. Gooseflesh prickled along my arms. I leaned over the stone rim again, peering uselessly into the tenebrous depths. I needed another test. I tapped the crowbar sharply against the well's lip. A pause. Then the echo returned, but altered, mimicking the rhythm with a low, guttural resonance. Not a simple reflection of sound, but an attempt at response, at speech. My mouth turned to dust. Acoustic anomaly, I told myself. Some trick of the shaft's structure, yet the explanation felt thin, inadequate against the visceral wrongness of it. I tossed another stone. This time, a soft murmur drifted up, almost coalescing into meaning before dissolving back into silence. Enough. The house awaited, and daylight was burning. Within the house, stale air pressed close. The main room held furniture draped in white sheets, spectral forms in the dim light. Floorboards groaned their ancient complaints with every footfall. I explored hallways, a kitchen frozen with rusted appliances, a staircase ascending into shadow. Dust lay thick as velvet. Cobwebs festooned the corners. It was a place utterly surrendered to time. Yet, the well remained lodged in my thoughts, an insistent, unsettling presence. My research notes felt trivial, my focus constantly drifting back to that dark opening and its phantom voice. As dusk began to bleed into the sky, I resigned myself to spending the night. My sleeping bag lay in the truck. Derelict houses held no fear for me, or so I thought. I established a small camp in a corner of the living room, away from the vacant stare of the windows, my battery lantern casting a small pool of light, a dry sandwich, a swallow of water. Fatigue settled in, but brought no ease. An irrational urge pulsed within me. Go back, look into the well again. I suppressed it. Morning would be soon enough. Sleep, when it finally came, was shallow and plagued by drifting unease. Midnight, or near enough, a sound jolted me awake, the crunch of footsteps on the gravel path outside. An animal, perhaps. Grabbing my heavy flashlight, I crept to the front door and eased it open. The night was moonless, the sky obscured by low-hanging clouds. Nothing moved in the yard. Then another crunch, closer this time, near the house's flank. Heart thudding, I followed the sound, sweeping the flashlight beam across the desolate scene. The skeletal barn, the listing fence, the dark sentinel trees. The noise repeated, unmistakably near the well. Slowly, cautiously, I advanced, the fine hairs on my arms erect, my pulse hammered, drowning out the night's other subtle sounds. I aimed the beam at the well. The stacked stones gleamed wetly. The discarded boards lay where I'd left them. And then, a voice, soft yet distinct, undeniably originating from the blackness below. It spoke my name, Silas. The sound was distorted, frayed, like a whisper forced through a broken speaker, yet the shape of the name was unmistakable. I froze, rigid. Imagination, surely. Fatigue playing tricks. But it spoke again. Silas, the syllables drawn out, echoing strangely. A cold dread trickled down my spine. I stumbled forward, right to the edge, and thrust the flashlight beam downward. It penetrated mere feet before the absolute darkness consumed it. Nothing. No bottom. No source. Silence returned, save for the sighing wind and the frantic cadence of my own breathing. My hands trembled, Backing away, I sought rational explanations, echoes, wind currents, but hearing my name, that specific name, resonated with a chilling intimacy. I retreated to the house, bolting the door, a futile gesture against something so intangible. Hours passed as I sat listening until exhaustion finally claimed me near dawn. Morning light did little to dispel the unease, yet it solidified a new resolve. My research felt secondary now to the gnawing need to understand the well. Was there some hidden chamber, some peculiar geological formation responsible for the acoustic phenomena? After a meager breakfast of dried fruit, I returned outside. The world looked deceptively ordinary in the bright sun. The well was just a hole, a circle of stone beneath the open sky, the warped boards lying nearby like discarded thoughts. Leaning over, I called, "Hello?" The echo returned faintly, a simple reflection of my own voice. No name this time. Relief warred with a strange disappointment. From the truck, I retrieved a length of sturdy rope. Securing one end to a solid fence post, I tested its hold. My plan: lower myself just a short distance, scan the upper walls for ledges, openings, anything unusual. Heart hammering against my ribs, I looped the rope securely around my waist and eased myself over the stone lip. The interior was instantly cold, the stones slick with perpetual dampness. Down a few feet, flashlight beam cutting weakly into the gloom, I saw only more darkness descending. The air was thick, stale, smelling of trapped earth and something else, something mineral and old. I tapped the walls, listening. The sounds echoed normally, dully, yet, dangling there in the cold silence, felt profoundly wrong. A visceral urge to ascend overwhelmed me. Scrabbling back up, arms trembling with tension, I collapsed onto the grass beside the well, breathing hard. The memory of my name whispered from the depths felt undeniable now, inexplicable. Tiredness? Wind? No. I knew what I had heard. The remainder of the day was spent in a futile search for answers within the property's decaying structures. The house, the attic, the barn again, dust, decay, and a few fragmented ledges in the attic that offered no mention of the well. I forced myself through the motions of research, but my eyes kept straying to the window, pulled towards that dark circle in the yard. The well was a constant, low hum beneath my thoughts. As afternoon bled towards evening, restlessness consumed me. Every recollection of that distorted voice sent a fresh jolt through my system. Sunset painted the clouds in bruised colors. I sat on the porch steps, flashlight resting beside me, waiting. For what, I couldn't say. Part of me craved the return of the footsteps, a tangible adversary to confront. Another part prayed for absolute silence. For hours, the night offered only quietude. Then, near midnight, it began. Slow, deliberate steps, crunching on the gravel near the well. I rose, flashlight beam dancing nervously in my grip. Sweeping the light around revealed nothing, no figure, no source. As I approached, the steps ceased. My breathing was shallow, my palms slick with sweat. At the well's edge, I leaned forward, whispering into the void, "Is anybody there?" The echo returned, fractured and indistinct. I waited, straining my eyes against the impenetrable black. Then, a sound from within, a low, guttural murmur, followed by a faint scraping, like stone grinding against stone far below. Leaning further, my foot skidded on loose gravel near the rim. I steadied myself, one hand pressed flat on the cold, damp stone. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The voice spoke again. Silas. Closer this time, the distortion less pronounced, the syllables chillingly clear. The hair on my nape prickled. A wave of ice washed through me. Speech failed me. I stood paralyzed, breath catching in my throat, mind struggling to reconcile the impossible sound. Silas, it repeated, drawing out the final S into a low, unnerving hiss. A soft scuffling followed, the sound of something shifting on stone deep within the earth. My grip tightened on the flashlight, then faltered. It slipped, clattering against the stone lip, tumbling end over end into the darkness. For a fleeting second, its beam illuminated the rough-hewn walls, descending into blackness before it vanished entirely. Retrieving it seemed madness. My instincts screamed against venturing further, against leaning over that precipice unprotected. Then something else registered. Faint impressions in the damp earth near the well's perimeter. Footprints, shaped like ordinary shoes, yet disturbingly distinct in the soft ground. Fresh, old, impossible to say for certain, but they looked recent. A dull ache started behind my eyes. A leaden weight settled in my stomach. No one else should be here. Another scrape echoed from the depths, softer this time, followed by a whisper, too faint to decipher, but carrying the undeniable cadence of a question, or perhaps a command. An insidious pull emanated from the opening, a silent urging. My feet shifted, edging me closer without conscious thought. I found myself leaning towards the mole again, drawn by an invisible current. With a surge of will, I recoiled, stumbling back. I couldn't remain out here. I fled to the house, slamming and locking the door, though I knew it offered no real sanctuary. The rest of the night passed with my back pressed against a wall, clutching a spare flashlight and a heavy hammer, listening. The footsteps returned, circling the well, pausing, resuming, a relentless patrol just beyond the walls. Once, a low, resonant hum vibrated up from the well itself, a sound that felt ancient and deeply wrong. Through the grimy window pane, I saw nothing but darkness. Sleep was impossible. Dawn arrived gray and tentative, shrouded in a low mist that clung to the ground. I emerged onto the porch, into the cool, damp air. Fresh footprints clearly circled the well. My stomach clenched. Departure was the only sane option yet. A stubborn fragment of my researcher's mind, or perhaps something darker, urged me to stay, to seek some final piece of understanding. To simply leave felt like conceding defeat to the inexplicable. Through the long day, I revisited the well periodically. I spoke into its depths, tapped its stones, dropped pebbles. Sometimes silence answered. Sometimes faint, unintelligible murmurs drifted up. But my name was not spoken again in the daylight. That night, the footsteps resumed their patient circling. I remained inside, heart pounding a steady rhythm of fear, listening to the sounds orbit the dark aperture outside. Pauses, movement. Once, that low vibrational hum returned, seeming to resonate in the very foundations of the house. Peering out offered no clue, only mist and shadow. Eventually, sheer exhaustion dragged me under. At sunrise, the decision was made. I gathered my notes, my equipment, my dwindling resolve. One final walk to the well. The discarded boards lay sodden on the damp earth. I peered into the darkness one last time. It offered no parting sign, no final whisper, only silence, profound and watchful. A chill traced its way up my spine. I backed away slowly, turned, and walked to my truck. The engine turning over felt like a severance. I drove away from the property, the image of the well receding in my rearview mirror, a dark eye staring from the overgrown land. What resided in that stone shaft, I cannot say. I possess only the memory of the sounds, the palpable dread, the chilling intimacy of my name spoken by the unseen. Even now, safe in the mundane world, late at night, when silence deepens, I sometimes fancy I hear it. A faint, distorted echo of my name, Silas, whispering from some unfathomable distance, a reminder of the empty stone well, waiting patiently in the dark. The engine coughed its last metallic breath, a shudder rippling through the chassis before silence descended, absolute and profound. I drifted onto the gravel verge, the dust swirling like phantom limbs around an inert sculpture of failure. Stranded. The word echoed in the vast emptiness swallowing the road, miles unspooled behind me. Civilization, a forgotten rumor. No bars flickered on my phone screen. This mechanical betrayal, I dimly grasped, was merely the overture. My name is Elias. What follows is not the tale I intended to live, let alone tell. A simple traverse to my sister's nuptials, a gamble on seldom traveled byways, promising swift passage. Initially, the landscape seduced, undulating emerald hills kissed by a lazy sun, timber stands thick as secrets, homesteads scattered like forgotten thoughts. But twilight bled across the asphalt, stretching shadows into grasping fingers, and the pastoral charm curdled into something watchful, unnervingly still. Hours bled away. Then the dashboard flared, a single malevolent eye. The car bucked, a sickening lurch, then a stuttering decline. I wrestled it to the shoulder, scanned moments before the final surrender. Hood propped open, I squinted into the mechanical labyrinth, a nest of wires and tubes utterly alien to my touch. Hope, a fragile thing, withered. My phone remained a dead shard of glass and plastic. Help would require legwork, the old currency of desperation. A glimmer, faint as a dying ember, pierced the deepening gloom. A dwelling, perhaps half a mile distant. Not choice, but necessity. I began the trek, the crunch of my boots on the loose stone, the only percussion in a world stripped bare of nocturnal chorus. No cicadas thrummed, no owls called, just my own ragged breath and the gravel's complaint. The farmhouse materialized from the dusk, weathered planks, a porch listing like a drunkard, yet windows glowed amber and a battered pickup squatted nearby. Occupied. My hand hovered near the doorframe, rehearsing a plea for sanctuary and a telephone line. Then, voices, strained, urgent, leaking through the wood. "It cannot continue, Silas." A woman's voice, frayed at the edges. "Discovery. It looms." A man's guttural reply. "Ain't no soul gonna find naught. We're cautious, always. But the risk..." Her words choked off as my foot nudged an unseen, empty tin can. A clatter, sharp and intrusive. Inside, silence fell like an axe. I froze, lungs burning, acutely aware of my trespass into shadowed affairs. The door groaned open. A figure filled the frame, tall, raw-boned, shoulders like oak burls, his face, etched by wind and something colder, held eyes that appraised me without welcome. "Something you need?" The question was a challenge, hospitality a thin veneer. I forced moisture into my mouth, stretched my lips into a semblance of a harmless smile. "Deeply sorry to impose. My vehicle, it expired, down the road a ways. Hoped perhaps I could trouble you for a telephone." Silas's gaze lingered, unblinking, then flickered towards the interior darkness. A beat of silence stretched taut. When he turned back, a peculiar light danced in those cold eyes, chilling me despite the humid air. "Surely," he drawled, the friendliness sudden, jarring. "Can't abide leaving folks adrift. Step inside." Every fiber screamed retreat, flee into the indifferent night. But where? Need warred with instinct, and need won the desperate battle. I crossed the threshold. Floorboards protested my weight with ancient groans. The air hung thick, stagnant, scented with a cloying sweetness, underpinned by something rank, the perfume of decay. Dim light revealed a space choked with clutter. From a kitchen doorway, a woman watched, wiping her hands endlessly on a faded cloth. Her smile was a rictus, failing utterly to warm her eyes. "Agnes." "Phone's through here," Silas indicated, guiding me deeper. As I passed Agnes, I saw the white of her knuckles clenching the cloth, her gaze flicking between me and a heavy, reinforced door nearby. A cellar entrance, bristling with locks on the outside. An inversion of purpose that screamed wrongness. Silas gestured to a relic bolted to the wall, a rotary phone from a forgotten era. "Help yourself. Got the tow number memorized?" I hadn't, but the operator was my target. Lifting the receiver, I registered Silas positioning himself, subtly, blocking the path back to the front door. Agnes remained framed in the kitchen entrance, a statue of suppressed panic, her eyes darting. Me, Silas, the cellar door. I spun the dial for 0. Silence answered. Not a ring, not a buzz, just the flat, dead finality of a severed connection. "Trouble?" Silas inquired, his calm unnatural. My hand lowered the receiver slowly, thoughts scrambling. Seems the line. It's not working." He nodded, a pantomime of rural inconvenience. "Happens. Weather, you know." But the night outside was placid, clear. A lie, bold and obvious. "Look," I ventured, striving for nonchalance. "I appreciate the offer, truly, but maybe I should just walk on, find a service station." Silas's expression solidified. "Wouldn't recommend that. Things stir out there after dark. Best you stay put. Got a spare room. I'll run you into town come morning." It wasn't an offer. It was a pronouncement, underscored by his physical presence, barring escape. "Very generous," I stalled, mind racing for an exit strategy. Any strategy. But my sister's wedding, tomorrow, you see, and I really must. A sound tore through the tense air, chilling my marrow. From below, from the cellar, a muffled, desperate scream. Agnes gasped, a tiny sound swallowed instantly. Silas's face contorted, benevolence vanishing like smoke. "Now see? You've agitated our guest," he snarled, the words dripping menace. Panic detonated. Survival instinct surged. I feinted left, lunged right, a desperate bid for the sliver of space beside him. He moved with startling speed. A hand like forged iron clamped onto my arm. The opposite wall met me with brutal force, stealing my breath. "Agnes!" he barked. "The rope!" I thrashed, kicked, fought with the ferocity of trapped prey, but his strength was crushing, absolute. Within moments, I was pinned, cheek pressed to the cold, grimy floor. "Should have kept to the road," he grunted, cinching rope tight around my wrists. "No matter. You'll meet the others soon enough." He hauled me towards the cellar door. I saw Agnes's face, tears tracing paths through the grime on her cheeks, but her body remained inert, complicit in its stillness. Whatever nightmare unfolded beyond that threshold, she was long past resisting. The locks clicked, metallic counterpoints to my hammering heart. The heavy door swung inward. A wave of stench rolled up, foul, thick, a miasma of old blood, excrement, and utter despair. As Silas began dragging me down the unseen steps into that Stygian blackness, I squeezed my eyes shut, convinced I was being pulled into the earth's foulest bowel. How long I endured that subterranean purgatory, I cannot say. Time dissolved into a cycle of dim light, fear, the arrival of fresh suffering, the quiet removal of the broken, the atrocities I witnessed. They fester beyond language, yet the spark of self-preservation, however faint, never fully extinguished. Then, chaos offered a fissure, a new arrival, fighting with the wild energy of undiluted terror, inflicted an injury upon Silas. In the ensuing pandemonium, a sliver of opportunity appeared. The details of my egress are a bloody, frantic blur, neither elegant nor painless, but I clawed my way back to the world. Now, recounting this, I see the skepticism in your mind's eye. Such tales belong to fever dreams, to morbid fiction. I offer only my conviction. It transpired. That house remains, secreted away on some nameless stretch of road. Silas and Agnes persist, curators of their monstrous collection, awaiting the next errant traveler. So, should your engine ever fail you in the deep gloaming, far from familiar lights, hesitate. Pause before seeking aid from the isolated glow. You cannot fathom the hell you might unwittingly approach, and entry is far simpler than departure. Pine smoke curled into the twilight, a fragrant offering against the sharp tang of mountain air. Around the fire's pulsing heart, the bright music of my children's laughter echoed, pure notes in the vast, darkening wilderness. Our first night sequestered in this cabin, a haven plucked from a dream. Perfect. If only perfection weren't such a fragile illusion, so easily shattered into the nightmare that would etch itself onto our souls. I am Eleanor, 40 years circling the sun, mother of 2, tethered usually to the flat sprawl of the Midwest. My husband, Julian, and I had chased this escape for months, yearning to sever the digital cords, to simply be with Clara, 13 now, and 9-year-old Leo. We discovered this place, a speck of timbered solitude, deep in the Canadian wilds, an outpost miles from any semblance of town, promising disconnection. And for 2 sun-drenched days, it delivered. We navigated trails thick with the scent of loam and pine, cast lines into the lake's glassy surface, and let the immense, diamond-dusted sky swallow our evenings. The children, miraculously untethered from their screens, rediscovered the earth, while Julian and I found quiet spaces to mend the frays of our work-worn lives. On the third night, marshmallows sticky and lulled by the fire's hypnotic dance, a sound intruded, a weight in the woods. Footfalls, heavy, deliberate, not the furtive scurry of woodland creatures. Julian rose, a silhouette against the flames, peering into the black tapestry of trees. "Anyone out there?" His voice, usually resonant, felt small against the immensity. Silence answered, stitched only with the night's familiar chorus. An errant breeze, perhaps. A trick of acoustics. We let it drift away, dismissed it. A dismissal I would come to regret with a visceral, enduring ache. Later, cocooned in sleep's embrace, the cabin's peace detonated. A splintering crash ripped me from my dreams. Before the fog cleared, our bedroom door flew inward, slamming against the wall. 3 figures filled the frame, faces erased by dark masks, guns held with unnerving stillness. "Nobody moves." The command cracked like ice. "Quiet, you live." My heart became a frantic bird battering against my ribs. Julian moved instinctively, a shield before me, but a gloved hand wrenched him from the bed. "The kids. Where?" Another voice rasped, rougher. "Please." The word tore from my throat, thin and trembling. "Just children. Don't hurt them." The tallest, the leader, whose eyes glinted like chips of Arctic ice through the mask's slits, gave a curt nod. His companions vanished, returning moments later with Clara and Leo, ghosts in their pajamas, faces streaked with tears. "Mama?" Leo's whimper was a tiny sharp blade in my chest. I yearned to gather him close, to murmur assurances I didn't possess. They herded us like frightened livestock into the main room, forcing us onto the worn sofa. The leader prowled before us, the gun a constant, menacing extension of his will. "All right, listen," he began, his tone unnervingly level, almost conversational. "We need a place, quiet place. You're gonna help us with that. Play nice, you might walk away." Julian, ever the bulwark, found his voice. "Take anything, cars, cash. Just let my family go." A dry chuckle escaped the mask, devoid of warmth. "Not quite that simple, pal. We're all settled in for a bit." Through the suffocating hours that followed, fragments emerged. They were fugitives, fresh from a lucrative, violent score in the city. Our isolation was their sanctuary, our lives the collateral. We were permitted movement within the cabin's confines, yet always under surveillance. One, younger, called Finn by the others, carried an air of discomfort, almost apology. His counterpart, Rex, was a coiled spring of aggression, his weapon leaping at the slightest perceived infraction. But it was the leader, Silas, whose calculated stillness terrified me most. Behind those glacial eyes lay a terrifying pragmatism. We were disposable variables in his equation for survival. Days bled together, each sunrise bringing not hope, but a renewed, exhausting vigilance. We performed a strained ballet of normalcy for the children, swallowing our terror, while Julian and I exchanged fraught, silent dialogues, searching for an opening, a flaw in their watchfulness. Our phones were gone, the wilderness a vast indifferent prison. On the 5th day, I observed Finn. His gaze kept drifting to the windows, a nervous energy thrumming beneath his surface. When Silas and Rex stepped outside, patrolling the perimeter, I seized the sliver of opportunity. "Finn," I whispered, the sound barely audible above my own frantic pulse. "Help us. This isn't right. You know it." His eyes met mine, a battleground of conflict. "Can't. They'd kill me." "They might kill us anyway," I urged, desperation lending my voice an edge. "The children. Think of them." Silas and Rex returned before he could answer, but something had shifted in Finn's posture, a hairline crack in his resolve. That night, silence reigned, thick and heavy. As the others slept, Finn materialized beside me in the dim kitchen. "Back door," he breathed, the words ghosting past his lips. "Unlocked." Wasn't me. Adrenaline surged, hot and fierce. A chance, a terrifying, razor-thin chance. Capture meant I couldn't let my mind go there. I woke Julian, conveying the impossible plan through hushed whispers and urgent gestures, then Clara, then Leo, impressing upon them a silence deeper than sleep. Each step toward the rear of the cabin was an agony of slowness. Floorboards groaned like tortured souls beneath our bare feet. We reached the door, hope a fragile butterfly in my throat, only to have it crushed by a voice slicing through the stillness. "Leaving so soon?" Silas stood in the hallway shadows, gun leveled. My spirit plummeted. So close. Then, the impossible. Finn stepped from behind Silas, his own weapon raised, not at us, but at his leader. "Let them go, Silas. It's done." The air crackled. A standoff, thick with menace. Silas, assessing the odds with Rex still oblivious, slowly, reluctantly, lowered his gun. "Big mistake, Finn," he snarled, venom dripping from the words. "Only mistake was listening to you," Finn shot back, his voice trembling but resolute. He flicked his gaze towards us. "Go. Now. I'll handle this." We didn't hesitate. Bursting through the unlocked door, we plunged into the cold embrace of the forest night. Air tore at our lungs. Shouts erupted from the cabin behind us, the muffled thud of a struggle. But looking back was a luxury we couldn't afford. We ran, fueled by raw terror, until exhaustion felled us in a small, moon-dappled clearing. Catching ragged breaths, the reality washed over us, alive, free, but adrift in an unforgiving wilderness, miles from anywhere, stripped bare of supplies, directionless. Julian took command, his voice steady, despite the tremor I saw in his hands. "Move. We have to keep moving. They could follow." We pushed onward, navigating by the cold indifference of the stars, praying northward would lead us toward salvation, a road, a light. The children stumbled, weary beyond measure, but fear was a relentless goad. Dawn painted the eastern sky in bruised purples and tentative golds when we heard it, the distant, beautiful growl of engines. Hope surged, lending strength to our failing limbs. We crashed through the final barrier of trees onto the improbable ribbon of a highway. It wasn't long before a transport truck slowed, its air brakes hissing. The driver, a man named Gus, with kind lines etched around his eyes, gaped at our disheveled state, listened with growing shock to our fractured story. His phone summoned the world back to us, the police, safety. He drove us toward the nearest town, toward the end of the immediate nightmare. The ensuing days dissolved into a whirlwind of official reports, gentle medics, and choked phone calls to voices thick with worry. We learned Finn had indeed subdued Silas and Rex, holding them captive until sirens wailed through the wilderness. His testimony, braided with ours, ensured their future would be measured in years behind bars. Driving home, finally, truly home, the ordeal settled within me, not as a memory, but as a landscape reshaped. The terror was a raw wound, its scars destined to remain. Yet beneath it pulsed a profound, unexpected gratitude for Finn's fractured conscience, for the astonishing resilience of my family, for the simple decency of Gus. Above all, I marveled at the strength we'd unearthed within ourselves. Staring into the abyss, we hadn't blinked. We'd fought, endured, escaped. Our familial bonds, already tightly woven, had been tempered in that crucible, emerging stronger, unbreakable. That cabin, intended as a sanctuary, became the stage for our deepest fears realized. But gazing at Julian, at Clara and Leo, exhausted yet whole beside me, I understood. Whatever shadows stretched before us, we would face them. We had confronted the darkness and walked back into the light, carrying the knowledge of our own improbable strength. Our idyllic escape had twisted into horror, but in surviving it, we discovered the fierce, unyielding core of who we were together. The silence of the vacant tavern, thick and viscous as old ale, shattered like cheap crystal. A violent crack echoed off the dark wood panels. My pulse hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. As I whirled, damp bar rag clutched tight. Across the desolate space, the knot of men who'd refused departure solidified in the gloom. Their eyes, reflecting the low amber light, held a predatory gleam. In that instant, the mundane closing ritual warped into something primal, a struggle for existence. 6 months, I'd poured drinks at the Rusty Compass, a haven of worn leather and spilled secrets. Not a calling, but the late hours funded textbooks and tuition fees. Mostly, nights dissolved into the gentle clinking of glasses, the low murmur of regulars nursing lagers, perhaps the occasional boisterous cluster needing a firm nudge toward the exit. Nothing, however, had forged me for the crucible this particular Tuesday night would become. It began unremarkably. The familiar ebb and flow of patrons left behind the usual detritus, sticky rings on the bar top, constellations of peanut shells scattered on the floor. By 1 a.m., only ghosts and shadows remained, save for the 5 figures crammed into a corner booth. They'd anchored themselves there hours prior, their volume swelling, their edges roughening with each successive round. An hour ago, I declared their tab closed, a decision met with growled displeasure. Now, polishing the bar's surface, counting down the final minutes, I felt their collective gaze, a tangible weight pressing against my skin. "All right, fellows," I projected, stitching cheerfulness into my tone. "Last orders were a while back. Time to square up and call it a night." The bulkiest among them, Reese, shorn head gleaming, arms a tapestry of ink, leveraged himself upright. He swayed, a precarious monument steadied by the table edge. "Ain't going nowhere, dollface," his voice scraped, thick with liquor. "This party's just warming up." Ice traced a path down my spine, but I held my voice level. "Apologies, but the establishment is closed. I have to insist you leave now." That's when the empty beer bottle left his hand, arcing through the air to detonate against the far wall. The explosion of glass seemed to hang in the stunned quiet, followed by Reese's raw, grating laughter. "Gonna make us, little bird," he mocked. His companions erupted, a discordant chorus of menace. Instinctively, my hand darted towards my phone on the back bar, a lifeline to the outside world. But Reese, defying his intoxicated state with surprising speed, vaulted the polished mahogany barrier, a blur of denim and muscle. His hand slapped down, sending the phone skittering across the worn floorboards, vanishing beneath a shadowed table. "Tut, tut," he breathed, his face too close, the stench of stale beer hot on my cheek. "No need for the boys in blue. This stays between us." I retreated, my heart a frantic drum against my sternum. The other four were deploying, deliberate movements cutting off the pathways, sealing the exits. A cage was forming. "Listen," I pleaded, wrestling my voice into steadiness. "The till. Take what's in it. I won't try to stop you. Just please, go." Reese chuckled, a sound utterly devoid of warmth or humor. "Oh, we'll get the cash, but we got other appetites tonight." His leer was a physical blow, stripping away any ambiguity. Panic clawed at my throat, but beneath it, something else surged. Adrenaline, a wildfire igniting in my veins. I would not be prey. My fingers closed around the nearest object, a heavy, unopened bottle of premium scotch. Summoning every ounce of strength, I swung it like a club. It connected with the side of Reese's head with a resonant thud. He recoiled, more startled than incapacitated, but the momentary disarray was my window. I scrambled over the bar, landing awkwardly, narrowly evading the clumsy grab of one of his cronies. My thoughts raced, mapping the terrain. Front door impossible. Back exit through the kitchen. If I could just make it. I bolted, weaving through the maze of tables and chairs. Behind me, angry shouts erupted, the thudding cadence of heavy boots in pursuit. I slammed through the swinging kitchen doors, the metallic tang of old grease and disinfectant filling my nostrils. My eyes desperately scanned the stainless steel landscape for an equalizer. My hand found it, the dense, reassuring weight of a cast iron skillet. Just as the first pursuer stumbled through the doorway, I swung without conscious thought. The iron met his face with a sickening crunch. He collapsed like a felled tree. No time for relief. The others were spilling into the kitchen. I backed away, hoisting the skillet defensively. "Stay back!" The yell tore from my throat, sounding far bolder than the trembling reality within. Reese filled the doorway, a crimson rivulet tracing a path from his temple where the bottle had struck. His eyes were chips of ice, burning with cold fury. "You'll bleed for that," he snarled, lunging. Alcohol and rage made his movements sloppy. I sidestepped, bringing the skillet down hard on his extended forearm. A strangled howl ripped through the air as he crashed backward into a towering rack of pots and pans. The resulting cacophony was deafening. I seized the distraction, lunging for the heavy steel back door. My fingers scrabbled at the deadbolt, precious heartbeats lost to the stubborn mechanism. Just as the bolt finally slid free, a brutal hand seized my hair, yanking me backward off my feet. Pain exploded in my scalp. I was spun around, face to face with another of them, his breath a foul miasma of liquor. "Going somewhere," he sneered. In that instant, something fractured within me. The fear, the violation, the fury. It coalesced into a white-hot point of pure, unadulterated rage. My knee snapped upward, finding its target with brutal efficiency. As he doubled over with a choked gasp, I brought the skillet around in a vicious arc, smashing it against the side of his skull. He crumpled, inert. The back door, now unlatched, swung open, admitting a gust of cool, damp night air, a fleeting illusion of salvation. Then two more figures filled the opening, blocking the narrow path to freedom. Outnumbered, cornered, skillet my only shield. My gaze flickered between the newcomers and Reese, who was groggily pushing himself upright. "I don't want to hurt anyone else," I stammered, the tremor returning to my voice. "Just let me go." Reese laughed, a sound like stones grinding together. "Oh, you've done it now, little bird. We were just gonna have a bit of fun. Now it's about education, a lesson you won't ever forget." They began to advance, fanning out, tightening the net. I retreated until the cold, unyielding steel of the industrial refrigerator pressed against my spine. This was it. No more room, no more options. As I braced for the inevitable onslaught, the cramped kitchen was suddenly bleached by an overwhelming flood of light. We all froze, blinking against the unexpected glare. "Police! Nobody move!" Never had two words sounded so beautiful. The kitchen was instantly a swarm of navy blue uniforms and drawn firearms. The remaining men, caught completely off guard, offered little resistance. Hands were cuffed, bodies searched, angry protests silenced. As the adrenaline tide began its relentless ebb, my legs buckled. I slid down the refrigerator's cold surface, landing hard on the grimy linoleum. A female officer knelt beside me, her expression radiating quiet concern. "Are you okay, miss?" Her voice was gentle. I could only nod, my own voice lost somewhere in the receding terror. She helped me stand, guiding me out of the kitchen's chaos. The main bar area was now a hive of official activity. Officers scribbling notes, paramedics examining the subdued assailants. Later, cocooned in a scratchy shock blanket in the back of an ambulance, the stark reality began to crystallize. 5 violent men. I had faced them. I had not just survived. I had fought. The ensuing weeks were a fragmented montage of official statements and courtroom procedures. Reese and his companions, it turned out, possessed histories checkered with similar brutalities. They were charged with a litany of offenses, attempted assault prominent among them. Standing against them, I realized, might have shielded others from their future aggressions. I never returned to pouring drinks at the Rusty Compass. The owner, sympathetic, offered assistance, finding daytime employment. But the night had irrevocably reshaped my internal landscape in ways still unfolding. I enrolled in self-defense courses, the discipline branching into various martial arts. A reservoir of strength I never knew existed began to surface. Eventually, I found myself teaching, guiding other women to unearth their own resilience, their own power to protect themselves. Sometimes, in the deep quiet of the night, the phantom echo of shattering glass still resonates. The visceral memory of being cornered, the suffocating weight of being outnumbered, still flickers. But these ghosts no longer hold dominion. They serve now as stark reminders of my own capacity when pushed beyond perceived limits. That night behind the bar stands as the nadir of my experiences, yet paradoxically, it was the very night I unearthed my fundamental strength. For that strange, painful gift, a sliver of gratitude exists. Now, the reflection staring back from the mirror isn't a victim, it's a survivor, a fighter, and I know, with unwavering certainty, that whatever life dares to throw my way, I possess the fortitude to meet it head on.